Welcome back, everybody. My name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking. In this series, we are rebuilding the user interface of popular apps in SwiftUI. And right now, we're rebuilding Spotify. This is the fourth video in the Spotify section. So if you missed the first three, go check them out. Those are available for free on YouTube in this playlist. This is the fourth video now. We're looking at the detail screen. This is the second screen that we were building in the Spotify app. It's got a really nice user interface. I think the Spotify team has probably spent a lot of time perfecting the UI of this screen. Let's jump into Xcode and write some code. Welcome back, everybody. We are back here. We are building the Spotify app, or at least a mock version of it. This is the final version. This is where we are so far. So we've got our home screen basically set up. Got our categories are clickable. We got the little buttons for our recent cells. We got our new release cell here, as well as all of our rows, which are looking really nice. The scroll view is extending all the way through the edges of the device. Looks beautiful. They're clickable. We got a bunch of different rows here, and I think it's looking really nice overall. In this video, we're going to start the next screen, which is, if you click one of these, it opens up this detail screen. So we got an image at the top. We got some nice animation, a little stretchy header. We got some animation on the navigation bar as you scroll up. And then we got all these cells, of course, these reusable cells down here as well. So in this video, we're going to start with the top cell here. And in the next video, we're going to start moving down this screen as well. But this video should be a lot of fun. And without further ado, let's get going here. So I'm back in my project here, and I'm going to open up the navigator, and inside our core folder, we're going to create a second screen here. I'm going to call this one a SwiftUI view. Let's call it Spotify playlist view. I think this is the view that they use for their actual playlists. If you click on a playlist, you get the playlist name here and then all the songs in the playlist. This is going to be a Z stack, just like the last screen. We're going to add a background with a color.Spotify black, and we will ignore that damn safe area. And on this screen, we're going to create a couple cells here. So this top cell, it honestly doesn't have that much data in there, but I want to make it a reusable cell so we can very easily work with this stretchy header. So let's create a custom cell for that. So let's jump into our component section. I'm going to right click, create a new file, a SwiftUI view. I'm going to call this one a playlist header cell. What I want to do is actually put this in a scroll view on the preview, just like we would actually in the app. So I want to give it a real world scenario. So firstly, let's put on the screen just a quick rectangle with a frame. Let's just give it a height of maybe 300. Cool. So what we're going to do is customize the preview quick, make it a Z stack, give it a background of color black, ignore the safe area, and put this in a scroll view. And we'll put this at the top of the scroll view here. And let's just make this a .fill color.red for a second. All right. First and foremost, I want the scroll view to extend up to the top edge of the device. We can see here that this goes all the way to the top edge. So the scroll view should probably ignore the safe area. All right, let's get coding. So if we can see the preview, there's some text and then there's an image. Let's pass in some values. So var title of type string. I'm going to set this equal to some playlist title goes here. Var subtitle, type string as well. Let's set this equal to subtitle goes here. Keep it simple. Var image name of type string. We'll set it equal to the constants dot random image. And I think that is good for now. So firstly, let's put the image on the screen. So let's keep the frame of 300 for now. I'm going to create here an image loader view. And I will pass in a URL string of type, pass in the image name. Cool. We can see that it is scrolling here. It's not stretchy yet, but it is scrolling from the top of the screen. You can see the text here is actually an overlay on top of the image. So in here, I'm going to put a V stack. Let's align this V stack to the leading edge, alignment of leading. Let's give some spacing of maybe 8 and open the brackets. At the top, we'll put text with the subtitle. Below that, we'll put text with the title. Let's give the subtitle a font of headline. give the title a font of large title, even a font weight of bold, blacken it a little bit. Let's give this entire VStack a foreground style of .Spotify white. You can see it here, but we can't really read it on top of this image, right? So a couple things that we need to do. Firstly, let's just give this a background of color.red. So we can see where it is, but where is it inside the actual image, right? It's right in the center of the entire image. When you add an overlay, there is actually an alignment of the entire overlay. So let's align this overlay to the bottom edge. I can go bottom leading. Next, I want to push it off the edge of the image. We can see that here there's some padding over here. So before we add the background, let's give it some padding of maybe 16. Push it off the image a little bit. Next, we need to add a gradient behind the text. Because if you don't have anything behind the text, if you have text on image, it gets basically impossible to read. So the solution is to put a gradient behind the text so that it makes it a little bit more visible. So here we're going to add a .background with a .linear gradient. And I'm going to use the colors here. And for colors, let's start with .red and .blue, and we'll go from the top to the bottom. A good idea when dealing with gradients is to start with these hard colors so you can just see it very visibly. So the first problem I have here is that it's not going all the way to the edge of this image. It would look super weird if the gradient just cuts off here. So here I want to add a frame with a max width of infinity. When I add that max width, obviously this gets centered inside that frame. So I want to add alignment of leading here as well. So many leading alignments, I know, guys. All right, next I want to add the shadow color, which let's create up here a var shadow color of type color. So I'm going to make this Spotify black opacity of 0.8, so 80% opacity on the background there. And then what I'm going to do is animate from the top to the bottom, so it's stronger on the bottom and less on the top. A SwiftUI developer would probably say, let's go from color.clear down to shadow color. But from using SwiftUI long enough, I have learned that what is actually looks better, you're not going to be able to tell from the preview, is actually using shadow color to shadow color, and then just making this opacity of 0. So for whatever reason it is, the gradient between shadow color of 1 opacity and 0 opacity generally looks better than between shadow color and clear. So that's what we're going to do here. And now we can at least read the title while it's above the image. The next thing I want to do is make this actually stretchy. So we're going to here import SwiftUI, and we're going to use a modifier. We'll do .stretchy header as stretchy header with a starting height of 300 pixels. So this is a component because I've used this component in many apps before and I'm tired of rewriting this. If you guys want to write this code yourself, just jump in here to the definition and you can see that it is just a quick view modifier. And this is all of the code that we have here for this component. So it's basically, it takes your content, puts your content inside a geometry reader, adds a frame, clips to the frame, but the magic is in the offset. And it basically just changes the offset of the image. So as the scroll moves, it changes the offset, basically inverse of the scroll. So it makes sure that instead of moving down with the scroll, it kind of moves up against the scroll so that it appears to be stretchy. You guys can just copy this or you guys can just copy this or rewrite it or make your own customizations to it if you want. I'm not going to spend time doing that right now. You guys can just use the package if you want as well. Let's get rid of the frame here so that we just have as stretchy header. That's going to set the frame as well. And when I scroll, it should work, which looks pretty good here. I've used this enough times to know that these images are a little tricky depending on how the image lays out. So what I usually do with the stretchy headers, I'll add a rectangle here with opacity of 0, and then add an overlay on the rectangle, just like we did with the images earlier, and just put the image loader view as an overlay on the rectangle instead. It just seems to be a slightly more like performance catch of edge cases way to write this. So now we just have a rectangle on the screen, and the stretchy header is actually on the entire rectangle and not just the image object. Cool. I think that's looking pretty good. It literally took us like 10 minutes, not that much code, and that's a great user experience. Feels really natural. Let us now pass in the starting height. So let's come up here. We'll say var height of type CG float, set it equal to 300 to start. Pass in the height down here. Let's get rid of this line of code. I'm going to jump back to my Spotify playlist view. Let's see, what do we need? We want a scroll view on the screen. Let's go a vertical scroll view. Let's make sure these scroll indicators are .hidden, and let's put at the top let's actually put this in a lazy V stack because we're going to have a lot of cells in this V stack here. A lazy V stack with spacing of 12, open the brackets, and we're going to add in a playlist header cell. All right, so the height here, I'm going to make this maybe 250 to start. See how that looks. The title, we need a product. So when we go from the first screen, this screen here, to the next screen, we're going to pass in the product that we click on. So if I click on this, it's a MacBook Pro. So we're going to pass a product from one screen to the other. So up here, we're going to pass in a product of type product. And I'm going to give it a default value. And we don't have a default value, so I can create a custom product here. But I don't want to actually have to write out this whole custom product every time. So what I'm going to do is jump into the product and actually create a static var. And I'm going to call this a mock of type product. And in here, I will create a product. And I'm going to triple click on this to highlight it. Control M to break it into all these individual lines. Let's give it an ID of 1, 2, 3, a title of example product title. Description, this is some mock product. Description goes here. Price, let's give it a price of $999. Discount, I don't even know what that means. Rating of maybe 4.5. Stock of 50, sure. Brand, let's just give this a Apple. Category, let's just do electronic devices. I don't know if that's a category. Thumbnail is the image, so we're going to go constants.random image, and then images, we're going to just create an array of the same thing. So we're going to do constants.random image. Let's do it 3 times. I think that will work. We might have to customize this a little bit later. For what it's worth, a lot of times in my apps, when I have to do this is a pretty simple data model, but if you have a lot of data and a lot of complex data, it's definitely an idea. I'll just copy this and I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll paste in this product, literally like this struct, and I'll say, create a mock of this struct. And it will output like this, literally word for word, maybe some different text, but it's very good at creating mocks, among other things. We have this mock. Let's go back to our playlist view. And now we're going to set this equal to the mock by default. The title here will be our product.title. Subtitle will be the product's brand. The image name will do product.thumbnail. And then the shadow color, we're going to leave as the default shadow color. So I'm just not going to include that. And just like that, we have our stretchy header on the screen. And I think it looks pretty good. All right, we're going to create one more cell in this video, which is going to be the next cell that goes right here. So if we look at the simulator, we got the description, we got a little logo here. Normally it's the Spotify logo. Here we're going to use the Apple icon, and we got some buttons here. These buttons aren't going to do anything in this demo, but we're going to write the code so that we can customize these buttons if we need to. So this is going to be a lot of logic, and I'm going to create a reusable cell just for this as well. So I'm going to right-click the component section, new file, SwiftUI view. Let's call this playlist description cell and click create. All right. Firstly, let's get the preview going here. I'm going to make a Z stack. Getting tired of doing this. Color.black, ignore the safe area. Put the cell on the screen. And then let's just add some padding on the cell. What do we got here? Let's look at it. Lots of data that we need to inject here. So this time I'm going to try to pass in all of the data from the get-go rather than doing it manually. So if I was actually writing this myself and not as a tutorial, the first thing I would do is say, what is the data that I need for this description cell? Well, we have text up here. I'll make this a variable called description of type string. Now, I've used Swift enough to know that the word description is common in the Swift language itself. If you have basically anything, you can always call a color.black.description, and it's a thing in the Swift language. And so I often don't like to call things description because the compiler can get confused from time to time. So we're going to call here this description text and set it equal to some description text. And I'm going to set it equal to the product.mock.description. That will be our default description. Below that, we have the user's name pops in right here. So it says Terry, that's going to be the current user's name, like made for you. So we'll say the user name of type string, I'll set it equal to Nick for the preview. For our subheadline, so this little where it says laptops here, so I'm going to call it the subheadline of type string. We'll say that this is some headline goes here. And then we have a bunch of buttons. So we got all these buttons. And so just like we talked about in maybe 2 videos back, when we have the buttons in the cell, we don't want to couple the actions for each of these buttons to a specific action. Even though most of the time this button is always going to do one thing, at face value, you might think it's going to do one thing, but you never know if you're going to actually tweak the logic. Maybe you're going to reuse this cell somewhere else. Maybe you're going to change what it actually does for some users. And so rather than having to customize the cell every time, we're going to pass in the actions, and then we'll actually create the actions on the playlist view itself. So here I'm going to create a variable called onAddToPlylistPressed. Playlist pressed. That will be a function that returns nothing or void. We will wrap that in parentheses to make it optional and set it equal to nil to start. I'm going to copy and paste that. The second one's going to be on download pressed, on share pressed, on ellipsis pressed. Got 2 more on shuffle pressed, on play pressed. Let's get the code going in here really quickly. Let's create a VStack, some alignment of, we know this is going to be leading, spacing of 8, because we love factors of 8. The text here is going to be a description text. We'll make this a foreground style of .Spotify light gray. And we're going to give this a max frame as well, max width of infinity, align it to the leading edge. Let's render it on the screen, see if it actually loads quick. Below this is going to be this little made for Terry section. So let's make that an H stack, spacing of 8, and open the brackets. On the left, we're going to have an image with a system name. We're going to use the Apple logo for now. It's one word, Apple logo. In Spotify, they have the Spotify logo, but I don't have that logo loaded anywhere. Let's give it a font of Title 3. And let's give this a foreground style of .Spotify green. About time we used the damn Spotify green. On the right of this, we're going to use some text concatenation. We don't do this that often. So text, we're going to write made for with a space. And then we're going to create another text that says the user's name. So here I'll pass in username. This entire VStack, let's just give it a default .foreground style of .Spotify light gray. I'm going to give the entire thing a font of .callout, as well as a font weight of medium by default. Cool. So when I create this, you will notice here that there's 8 spacing between each of these. So between the Apple and the made for, and between the made for and the Nick. And so we can actually see that if I add a background here, color.red and color.blue. Cool. I've separated these is because if you look at this, the font on the made for is different than the font on Terry. So I want to use 2 different texts. So on the font on the username here, I'm going to actually make this bold. I'm also going to make this a foreground style of Spotify white. But now the problem that I have here is that there's this 8 spacing between these. And now it looks okay. I don't think it's a big problem. I can make it less spacing. I can customize the spacing. But really what I want is the default, just like the space that would be, is if this was all one big text, what would that regular spacing be? So instead of having two different components here, I'm going to concatenate or basically add these two texts together so that they render as one big text. So I don't need the backgrounds here. And I'm just going to add a plus sign in between these. So really I can add it anywhere as long as it's in the code between these. So I can go like this, and now they're actually concatenated into one. These modifiers though are just on the second one. When I write this, it looks a little weird in code when we do this. So I usually just write it like this. It looks good. Let's cut this code, make it a private variable and call it made for you section. Type some view. Oh, I'm getting sloppy. Maybe I'm getting tired. I should go to bed. All right, made for you section. Put that on the screen here. Below that, we're going to have text with the subtitle, or maybe it's subheadline. There we go. And we got one more section with all of our crazy buttons, which let's do it really quickly. I'm going to create an H stack here. Let's go spacing of 0, so there's no spacing between them. And then we're going to create in here, let's create another H stack. So this H stack will be these 4 buttons on the left, which will also give spacing of 0. Open the bracket. Image, system name, and let's go plus.circle. All right, now before we actually make a bunch of these, I'm going to customize this one. So I'm going to give it a background of color.red. And we've been through this a couple times already in this series, but that's a really small tap area. Firstly, let's make them all bigger. So we'll do a font of title 2 here. All right, but still, that's still a pretty small tap area. And so what I want to do is add a little bit of padding before the tap area, maybe padding of 8. And that's part of the reason why when I'm making this component here, I could put spacing of 8 in between each cell. So if I have multiple cells, we can put spacing of 8 here, and then we don't need this padding here. But the problem is then it's not going to adjust the actual tap area. So what I'm going to do in these cells is not have padding in between the cells and just have padding on each cell so that the tap area is a little bit bigger. I'm going to create, let's make this one, it's color.red, and we're going to add an on tap gesture. We don't want it to be red, so we'll do color.black, opacity of 0.001. Let's copy that. Let's paste it 3 times, 4 times. The second one is going to be an arrow.down.circle. Third one will be a square.up and arrow up. And the last one will be an ellipsis. One thing that you're going to notice here is because we added padding of 8 here. So if we make this one back to red, the padding of 8 is on the left edge of this icon here, but I want this icon to actually line up with the text here. So I could just get rid of the padding and now it's going to line up, but I want to keep that extra tap area. So what I'm going to do is on this H stack, I'm just going to offset the X by -8. So the whole stack's been pushed over 8, but the tap area will remain. Make it back to black. Cool. Now I'm going to, below this H stack, on the right of it rather, I'm going to create another H stack for these 2 buttons on the right here. Let's do another H stack here. Let's go spacing of 8 this time. Open the brackets. I said 8 this time as if we never used 8 before. Image, system name. Let's make this, let's actually just copy this, paste it here. This one will be the shuffle icon. Let's give this a font of .system. We'll go maybe 24. That seems big enough that I don't really need extra padding on it. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to copy and paste this. And then this last one will be play.circle.fill. And let's make this one bigger, maybe 46. And on this H stack, we'll do a foreground style of .spotify green, which looks super nice here. Last but not least, on the first H stack, give it a max frame, max width of infinity. And let's align it to the left edge within that frame. leading edge. And I think that looks pretty good. All right. I'm going to cut this entire row here. So this title, this font title, all the way up to the first H stack. Move it down here. I'm going to set private var. Let's call this buttons row of type sum view. Paste these in. And now I have nice, clean, organized body up here. So I can very easily share this code with another developer and they'll know exactly what's going on in about 2 seconds. I've made everything customizable, so I can customize what I'm sending in and customize all of these actions as well. Let's jump back to the Spotify playlist view here. And below our playlist header cell, we'll add a playlist description cell. Same thing. I'm going to triple click on this. I'm going to Control M to organize it. And here, let's add the product.description. Here we need the username. I'm just going to put Nick for a second. I'll add the product dot, maybe the category for now. And then I don't actually have actions for any of these, and we're not going to add the actions either. So we could leave these as empty closures, but I'm just going to leave them as nil for now, just to keep the code a little clean. So nil, 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 and nil. See that renders. On this whole cell, let's just give it some padding of maybe dot horizontal of 16. I'm going just horizontal here because the vertical padding is going to be set within the V stack that it's in. So this looks pretty good. The last thing I want to do here is load up the user as well. So just like we passed in a product, let's pass in the user, because on our home screen, we're actually loading up the user already, the current user. So here, let's just pass in a var user of type user. And we'll set it equal to the mock as well. And there is no mock user yet, so let's make one. Jump in here. We'll say var static var mock of type user. And let's add a user here. Triple click on this. It's Control M, break it up. User ID, let's do 444. First name Nick, last name Sarno. You guys are welcome to request me on LinkedIn if you'd like. Age, let's just say 76 for now. Email is hi@hi.com. We're not going to use the phone, so I'll leave it as a blank. We're not going to use this. We're not going to use this. Image, let's do constants dot random image. Height, let's do 180. I think it's in centimeters. And then weight, let's just do weight. We're not going to use. Let's just say 200 and call it a day. We got our mock here. Jump back to our code. User mock. Here we're going to paste in the user dot first name. Cool. And just like that, our second screen is coming together. We are doing good, but we are not done yet. We got a lot more to build here. In the next video, we're going to take a look at creating these cells down here. A bunch of this reusable component. It's a pretty easy one. And then we're going to really focus on, if you notice here, the top here is there's a navigation bar that kind of animates in as this scrolls. And so we're going to work on that, as well as getting the back button set up in the next video. This video was very much just a setup video. We didn't really learn too much. We learned a little bit about creating a stretchy header. We got some practice in creating these buttons, making sure their tap gesture area is usable. And then generally, again, we're getting in the good habit now of creating reusable cells that are not coupled to anything so that we can make really reusable components going forward. Thank you all for watching. As always, my name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.